In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a simple pillow mock-up. This is a stock photograph that I purchased off a site called Shutterstock a few years back. It's approximately $10 per photo, but they do not, and they have a nice selection of clothing, home accessories, home decor, bedding, things like that, but they don't have selections incorporated. They're just plain photographs. Now I want to show you this method because sometimes you will come across photos like this. Like, in fact, I'm giving you a few in this course as freebies. But sometimes you may want to photograph your own object rather than using one that you have to purchase, or maybe the client has a specific item. So I want you to know how to do this from the beginning rather than depending on something that's already set up for you, because that's going to limit what you can do. So the first thing we need to do is make a selection of the pillow. Now, because this is a white on white, if I went with the default setting on the magic wand, which would be my first choice tool to use, if I click on the pillow, it actually picks the majority of the pillow as well as the background. The reason is because the 32 represents a range of colors. So even though this looks like white on white, it is actually a series of shades of gray that go from pure white into a light gray, and there's many different variations of that color. So that 32 indicates that it's picking up a range of color from the pure white all the way to the sort of medium gray, and we don't want that. That's not helping us get the clean selection that we need. So this one's easy though because it's got a white background. We could actually just bring this down to 1 and click on the background, and that, because the background is perfectly white, it's going to give us a perfectly great selection for that pillow. Now, had we left this at 32 and selected the background, we have the same problem as we had when we clicked on the pillow, where it's picking up the pure white, but in addition to that, 31 other shades of gray. So what we need to do is I'm deselecting, Command D, and then I go to the magic wand and then I adjust the tolerance. I'm going to try 1 because this visually appears to be a pure white, and see if that works. And we see again that it works perfectly. Now we actually have the background selected, so we want to actually inverse this so that the pillow itself is selected. And you can tell by the marching ant lines around the pillow but not around the edge. So that means the pillow is selected rather than the background. And very importantly, you want to learn how to save your selection. So you go to save selection and then name it however you want. I'm going to call mine contour. So every time I go back to this file, it's going to have that selection in there. I go to load selection, and then if there's only one, it'll pop up as the first choice, and if there are multiple selections, it's going to give you a list to choose from. So I'm going to say okay, and I can load that selection. Now, one thing I forgot to do is I want to save this file with a new name so that I can preserve my plain mock-up I'm going to preserve my plain mock-up for future use. So I'm going to name this, and it's our master. I'm going to say this is master. And I'm going to only have one Photoshop file for all of the pillows that I plan to do for my portfolio. So what I'm going to do now is, with the selection activated, I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Pattern, and go with the defaults in this pop-up, and then it's going to bring you a second pop-up. And what this is, it's automatically going to the first pattern in my pattern library. And you can see here that it has the zebra print, but that's not the print that I want for this pillow mock-up. So I'm just going to, I can see my pattern library here. I have it open so visually I can see it. And if you don't know how to access it, it's under Window, Patterns. And this is a fairly new feature that they've added to Photoshop just in the last couple of years. We didn't always have this visible palette, floating palette library. It was kind of buried under colors before. So I really like this view, and you can also look at small or large thumbnail view or list view and so on. I like this large thumbnail so I can recognize them right away. And then with this little tab, I'm going to navigate through my pattern library and pick the pattern that I actually want on this pillow. So I'm going to pick this teal rose design. Now this, it's showing up very large because when I save my patterns, which I'll show you in a later step, they were very high res. They were 300 DPI times 10 by 10 inches. So I may, usually I'm going to want to adjust the scale. Now you can type in a number that you want, like 50% or 25%. You can also use the slider to do that. It tends to go really large. It goes up to 1,000% and it goes down to 1%. So you have all the way from 1 to 1,000. So I'm going to pick just something that looks good to my eye. And I like to use round numbers, not like just something arbitrary, because it's just, sometimes I'm making matching products. So I want to have something that would be easy to remember, or I could keep notes of in a journal having to do with my product mock-up. So I'm going to go with this rose design at this scale right now. Now the thing is, another thing that makes your photos really realistic looking, which is a great feature of having these blank white stock photos, is you can duplicate this layer, and you only have to do this once. And let's call this pillow photo. And I'm going to drag it above my patterns. Now right now it's blocking out the design below. So what you want to do is change it to multiply. And what that does is it's giving us this very subtle shadow. If I take away the other layers or shut them off, you're seeing basically it's another copy of the photo on top of the pattern, and it's adding those shadows up to the pattern. So you can, because my pattern's completely blocking out the photo below it. I mean, there is a way that you can probably do multiply on it. That might work too, but you might forget to do it. And I think it's nice just having this on here one time, and these are at full strength. And you can also decide if it's muting your colors too much, you can also come in here and you could lighten this photo by selecting all and adjusting the brightness and contrast if you wanted something a little bit lighter. So from here, I call this Wild Rose Teal. And I like to name my layers so that at a glance I know what they are, because I can't really see that thumbnail so tiny. And then what I can do is now duplicate this layer. And in this case, I'm going to do my, I have another wild rose design in a different colorway. So I'm going to call it Wild Rose Fuchsia. And then I'm going to just double click on the pattern thumbnail and change it to the fuchsia color palette. And then I can, so quickly I already have 2 mock-ups done. Then what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layer again, and I'm just going to continue adding all of the patterns that I want to mock up for this particular project that I'm working on, or my particular collection. So I would, now this one these are the main hero prints, so I could even go back and rename these, because this might get confusing. I'm going to call this the hero. And I'm going to call this the Wild Rose Hero, and then this is going to be Wild Rose Damask, because I need to name each print that I'm using within the mock-ups so I can easily find them. And then I'll show you what the next step is in just a second. So also importantly, notice that the pattern doesn't come in centered. Like this lattice, there are going to be times you want it asymmetrical, of course. That's not any kind of rule, but in a design like this where it's very formal, let's say, I'd rather have it centered in the product. So if you try to just move this, it's not going to do anything. So what you need to do is unlink the mask to the pattern. Click on the pattern and then go to the Move tool. And then you can move this any way so that, let's say I want it centered from left to right, and I also want it centered from top to bottom. So that looks pretty good, and I can just relink that. Now I can just keep going with this. Let's just go to one more. Duplicate layer, and I'm going to call this the Wild Rose Damask Teal. And navigate to that pattern. Now, once I have, because I duplicated it, that saves me time because I don't have to recenter this one. This time, because it's the same design, it pops in just at the correct scale and in the correct position. So that's great. Now I can just keep going and going. I could add 20, 30, up to as many as you want layers for this pillow. And so I'm not going to embed this Photoshop file into my portfolio. I'm going to save out JPEGs for each one. So let's just save though, just to be safe. Always save your file before you do any major changes. So I'm now going to proceed with File, Save as a Copy, and then I'm going to, I have another subfolder for completed mockup. So I'm going to change this to a JPEG, and then instead of the word master, I'm going to put in the same name that I used on my layers, which we can see right here is Wild Rose Damask. Wild Rose Damask Teal, and save. And then turn that layer off. And I can also, I'm going to save out each one. I can also copy this text to save me some typing and more opportunity for human errors. So I'm going to go back to the save as a copy, go back to the correct folder, save it as a JPEG, and then I'm going to paste in this name. And then I like to take out the spaces just to keep my file name as short as possible, but it just saved me from having to type all that and not have inconsistencies in my naming, and then just save. So I would just proceed to do that with each layer, saving each one as a JPEG and saving using a consistent naming protocol for each design. And then one last thing I wanted to show you, in addition to, let's just see, I have to pick a different design. I think that would be directional. Let's just duplicate the layer. I'm going to call this one Dopamine Stripes Red Pink. This is what I'm going to bring in. I can see it in my palette, and these can be on or off because because this is a solid background, and you want to make sure all your patterns have backgrounds. If they do not have an actual white or color background, you do not want a clear background because then it could show through too much to the photograph or to a design below. So I'm going to change this design to this directional stripe that I have, and that's too big. Let's reduce it. Maybe a little bigger than that. Let's go with 25%. So right now it's clearly a vertical design, a vertical stripe, but let's say I wanted it on a diagonal. So I could come in here and put in 45 degrees and change it to an angle or whatever I want. And then I can also unlink it, go to the move tool, and reposition it if I don't like certain corners. Like let's say I just have, it came in and I have just this tiny piece of color here. I might want to just kind of increase that a little bit. I just find that to be a little more aesthetically pleasing. I also don't like it when I have just a tiny little sliver of color. So I will very carefully look at all the edges and see what's the best cropping for this design. And then you can see again with the, oops, I don't have the bottom picture on. You can see the difference between having the photo on top and not having the photo on top. That makes it look much more realistic. And let's just save one more time. And you can just continue building these. You could also create groups. Let's say that you want to organize these by group. So you can start a group and name it. So let's say I want to have all my Wild Rose designs in one folder. I can move this down to wherever, and I can move all of these, drag all of these. I'm holding the shift key to get them all into the folder. And that way your layers don't get so cluttered up, because you could have a folder for each collection where you might have multiple colorways or different coordinating designs from the same collection. You know, or you could, I have mine, I can also sometimes name it by client or by type of print, like say animal prints or florals, that type of thing. So it's really, once you start getting into dozens and dozens of layers, it is nice to keep it really well organized. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a mock-up of a coffee mug using the stock photo. And in this one, we need more than one selection. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the background because I know that it's pure white with my tolerance set at just 1. And if you looked at my pillow demo prior to this, you'll understand why I'm doing it this way. So I'm just selecting the background, and it gives us a nice clean contour around the mug, but I have this one extra area that I need to add. So holding the Shift key in combination with the magic wand, I can click on that and now add it to my selection. Now what we want to do is inverse so that we have the mug itself selected, and then we want to make sure to save that selection. So I'm going to call this contour, meaning the entire outline of the item. Now, if you're putting this into your portfolio and showing it to an actual licensee or client that is in the housewares, kitchenwares, dinnerware niche of manufacturing, they're going to know right away you're very amateurish if you put a design on the handle. So what you don't want to do is just take this shorter the shortcut of just plugging in a pattern into your mug, because that will not look very realistic. So what we want to do is modify this selection so it doesn't include the handle. So the first thing I'm going to do is just, the next thing is I'm going to hold the Option key to remove the handle, and I'm using the rectangular marquee. And I just want to zoom in close enough that I can really see what I'm doing. And that might not even be close enough. It's pretty good. It's pretty close to around the line. Okay, so that's good. I'm happy with that. But, oh, I missed one little part on the handle. So if you do that, just hold the Option and just go around that with either the marquee or the lasso tool. So the next thing I want to do is I also, because this is a three-dimensional object, a little bit of the inside of the mug is showing. And again, it will look very amateurish if you put a pattern there, because it wouldn't normally have a pattern on the inside on a mass-produced mug. Now I'm going to try using the ellipse tool because this is a curve, and I would love it if I could eliminate that from the selection by just holding the Option key and making a really long ellipse that is going to be a nice curve. We don't always, usually I would use the lasso tool, but since it's so close to a curve, I'm still going to have to fix it on the left and the right, but at least in the middle, it gave us a pretty good sloping curve. So I'm just going to zoom in now, and here I'm going to use my Option key in combination with the lasso tool to remove this inside. So, sometimes it's easier just to do this in little sections, and you want to make somewhat of a curved motion so that it will connect. The end of the lasso, the beginning and end of the lasso need to collect. And I'm holding my, let's see, let's just get a little better selection over here. It's worth putting in the time to make a perfect selection, because you only have to do this once. This will become your master coffee mug mock-up for the rest of your portfolio. Now here I need to add selection back in, because remember the mug itself is selected. So I'm holding my Shift key, and I'm going to curve up and get this little piece that got cut off. And so that's looking pretty good. So now I want to make sure that I save this selection. So this is now, I'm going to give this the name of the mug body. And you could use whatever naming call makes sense to you. As long as you save it, that's the most important thing. So let's just test that. I'm going to deselect, Command D, and let's just go back to Select, Load Selection, and then you can see, because we have two selections saved, we now have a pull down that allows us to choose which selection. So now what I want to do is add my first pattern. So I'm also going to just bring the layers palette over so it's easier to see. I don't need this. And I have my pattern library open. This is the folder that I'm using for my Surface Design digital demo. And I'll show you in a minute how to also add your own patterns. Right now I'm just going to select from my existing library. I'm going to have the selection activated first, and you then go to new layer, new fill layer, pattern, and just go with the default settings on this pop-up. Then it'll bring up a second pop-up. It automatically defaults to the first pattern in your library, which in this case is a black and white zebra. And that's not the pattern I want to mock up today. I want to go ahead and put in, let's say, for example, this black and white design. And it's way too big a scale for this. So I'm going to see what it looks like at 50%. I'm going to see what it looks like at 25%. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to say okay. But I don't like the position of it. I don't like this little part of the pattern over there. So what I want to do is unlink the pattern, go to the move tool, and that allows me to play with different positionings. Sometimes I might want it centered, or sometimes I might want to center the pattern, crop off the pattern in a good way like that. Like I don't really like this little tiny piece up there, so I'm going to see if there's a better cropping by moving this around. I think that's stronger there because it really fills up the mug area. And then you can lock that back in. And then the same thing that we did in the pillow mock-up, I'm going to duplicate the original photo. I'm going to duplicate, and then I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to move that above my pattern, and then select the effect as multiply. So that's going to give us that slight shadow overlapping our pattern so it looks more realistic. And then I can also name my pattern. This is the dot stripe black and white. Okay, and then I can simply go through and add additional patterns by duplicating the layer. I don't know what it's going to be called yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and name that later. I'll then double click on the pattern and then navigate to a different pattern to mock up. Now it's automatically going to keep the same percentage or scale that you had for your last one, so you can adjust as needed. I kind of like that scale. I could also try putting this at a diagonal and see how that looks. You know, so you could do a 90 degree, or you could do a sloped angle, 30, and whatever angle you want. Let's go with the 45 degree angle. That looks pretty good, and the scale looks pretty good. And then I can also look, I'm not quite happy with that little cropping down there, so I'm going to unlink, and then I'm going to, with the move tool, see if I can eliminate that little piece. And that was good because I had them also at the top, and I don't like that. So just by moving this around a little bit, I could make sure to have bigger pieces of the pattern on all edges, so it doesn't have a funny light area or something like that. And then I can now rename this into my wavy stripe. It's hard to see. This is red and pink. And I think it's a good habit to name your layers so that you at a glance can see what mock-ups have been done already, and you can use the same name for the JPEG that you're going to be saving out. So you would just continue building as many patterns in here as you want, and this becomes your master mug. As I mentioned, let's save one more time the PSD before we doing any saving out of JPEG. So with whichever layer you want to save, you go to File, Save as a Copy, and then I have a folder that I've made for my completed mock-up. So I'm going to change this name from, instead of master, I'm going to call it wavy stripe red pink, and change the format to JPEG. So that becomes, so my name is consistent with how I name the layer as well as how I name that art file, the pattern art file itself. And then I turn this off, and I can do the same thing for this one. Save a copy, and I'm going to go to the correct folder, JPEG, and then I'm going to change the name here. I could even, if I had done it earlier, I'll show it on the next one. You can actually copy that text. Stripe, black and white. Okay, so let's just do one more, just so I can demonstrate also the quicker way to name it. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to choose a different pattern. Remember, it's going to memorize the same scale and angle. If you want to eliminate that, this is a good time to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and put in this pattern. Now I like this one. I'm going to go ahead and put this at a 0 rotation, and I want it a little bit bigger. I can use this little drop down to size it. It's very tiny though, so like to go between 100 and 10% is just this tiny little amount, so it's a little hard to control, but that's maybe a quick way to size your patterns. I like to go with a fairly round number that I can easily remember, so that if I'm making matching products, that they all have the same percentage, or maybe I have one that's double the size of the other. So if I have one at 50% and one at 100%, those may look really good on my page, or maybe I want the patterns to all match in scale. So if I'm doing 50 or 40 or 30 or 10 or whatever, 200%, whatever the round number is, it's easy to remember or make notes of in your notebook. So I just say okay, and then this is where this one is called Geode Blue. So I'm going to double click and copy this text, Command C. Then I'm going to go File, Save as a Copy, go to the correct subfolder, select JPEG, and then I'm going to paste that name over this text, Command V, and I like to get rid of the spaces so I have shortened names, but that saves me from typing it and having any inconsistencies in my name. And then the only other thing is just kind of cleaning up these names here, such as Mug Overlay. And we can call this one Mug Master. So that's it. There's the Coffee Mug Master, and then you have under Load Selections all your different selection options, and then you have all your different patterns that you can build up as many as you want, and you only have one Photoshop to have to save, and know where you keep it in a master folder for product mockups. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a gift bag set. So this is a stock photo that I bought off of Shutterstock, and if you've looked at my other two demos on the pillow and the mug, you'll have more background and detail about how to make the selection of the background. But I'm going to just proceed with a tolerance of 1, because I'm pretty sure this is a pure white, and if I bump this up to 5, 10, 20, it's going to pick up the gift bag. So I'm going to keep this at 1 and click one time, and it's going to give me a pretty good selection around most of the gift bags. But I still have to come in here and add this manually, because in this photograph the bags have a shadow. So the first step I'm going to do is just zoom in as close as I can with the I'm going to use the rectangular marquee, and holding the shift key I'm going to add this shadowy area to my selection, because we're working on the background, remember. And then if I zoom in, I could see these little corners didn't get selected. And you do really want to take care with creating nice selections, because I am oops, it moved. I'm holding the shift space bar, excuse me, to get this. And I'm going to use the lasso tool. And I can see this, use the lasso tool in combination with the shift key to add it to the background selection. And then I'm going to use my I'm going to use the magic wand to try to get this black area, but you can see it has multiple shades of black, so I need to bump this up probably to about 15, and then holding the shift key I'm going to click on that, and that's not even quite enough, but I can click a few more times and get a pretty close selection. So I'm pretty happy with that, and that was easier than trying to do it with other tools available to us. So let's just see how that looks. Okay, so that looks pretty good for the left bag, and then holding with the shift key, I'm going to also click in these areas that include the handles, and then I'm going to zoom in now on the right hand bag. Now this one's clearly at an angle, so I'm not going to be able to use my rectangular marquee. I'm going to switch to the polygonal lasso tool. So holding the shift key, because we're adding it to the background, I'm going to start out here, and I'm going to click once, and I'm going to go to the corner, and then to the other corner, click, and then go around it until I can join these. When you hover over the beginning point, it brings up a little circle to the lower right corner of the tool, and that means that you're in the right place to connect. So I click on that, and it's going to add that selection now to the background. Now we have a similar situation where it has a little bit of an edge of black, and I'd like that to be outside of the design area so that it gives it a more realistic looking shadow. So I'm going to use the lasso tool again to go in to get this little rounded corner. I'm going to just quickly zoom over to the other side just to see what I'm dealing with. This one I need to actually remove, so I'm using the Option key to capture that, and then with the Shift key add a little bit back in. Okay, now I'm going to just zoom out a tiny bit, and with the magic wand, it's at 15, I'm going to hold shift and click. Hold shift and click. And that's given us a pretty good selection around the whole edge. There's a little bit that was missed here. Now I'm going to use the lasso tool, because this is such a narrow area to try to capture with the magic wand that I could end up just losing my whole selection. So I'm just going to do it a little piece at a time with the lasso tool. Okay, so let's zoom out. Command 0 to return to the original size. Now remember, we have the background selected. So now that I'm happy with this, I'm going to inverse, and then I'm going to save this selection as the 2 bag contour. And we're never going to use this one fully for design purposes, but we use it for building off. We use it as a reference and a starting point to build off of, to build other selections that are more specific. So while that's loaded, we're going to take the marquee, rectangular marquee, holding the Option key to remove the selection. We're going to just go over the entire right bag and eliminate that from the selection. So now we have a more specific selection of the bag. So I'm going to call this left bag with handle. Okay, and then I'm Command D, deselect, and then go back to load selection, and you'll see under here now it has both the 2 bag and the left bag with a handle. So I'm going to go to 2 bag contour again, and using the rectangular marquee with the Option, I'm going to do the opposite now and eliminate the left bag from the selection. So now I'm going to save this one as right bag with handle. Okay, deselect. Okay, so let's work on the left bag. I'm going to go ahead and load that selection, and I'm going to select left bag with handle, and this time I'm going to go in and take the handle out. For this to look realistic, that handle needs to show through the artwork. So I'm going to zoom in really close, and this is not, they're not a straight line, so I really have to use the lasso tool. So I'm going to use the lasso tool with the Option key to go around this braided cord. it's better just to do it in small pieces than try to get it all in one swoop. So let's see, that looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to go over to the other handle. We'll get the majority of the handle later with the marquee, a rectangular marquee. So again, I'm just doing the lasso here. And just making somewhat kind of loops or circular types of motion so that the ending is close to the beginning, and then it'll connect properly. And it's okay for that shadow to show. That's going to make it feel realistic. And there's a little piece I missed right there. And this is the little piece I cut off of the white bag, because otherwise there'll be a white space there. It'll look a little messy. So take your time to get it right, because you only have to do this one time. And that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is use the rectangular marquee to eliminate the rest of the handle. So I'm going to hold Option and just swipe this down. And then now we have a really nice selection of the left bag with no handle. So I'm going to say cancel, sorry. I need to save selection. And if you need to be reminded of your names, I'm going to, I can peek under there so that I'm consistent. Left bag, no handle. Okay, deselect. Now we're going to do the same thing for the right bag. So we'll load our selection of the right bag with handle, and then we're going to go in. Now we could eliminate this handle as the first step, so I'll do it the opposite way that I did from the left bag. So I'm going to use the polyagonal tool with the Option key to remove it from the selection, and I'm going to just go across this, and it's really not very straight, but it's kind of hard to get out of the lasso tool once you use it. So I'm just going to go with, I'm going to undo that. Oops, it undid everything. Redo. Okay. So I'm back to where I was. That polyagonal didn't quite work out. It wasn't tight enough to the edge, so I'm going to do it again, but start closer. So I'm going to start here, holding the Option key, and then I'm going to just click there and then skip and click again, because when I tried to do it all in one swoop, it wasn't capturing the edges tight enough to the top of the bag. Okay, so now I got rid of most of the handle, but I still have to go in here and do the part that's tied to the bag. So I'm going to use the Option key with the lasso tool. Sorry about that. I zoomed in and then it zoomed out again. Trying to get just the right scale so I can see this in full detail. So I'm holding my Option key and just making little swoops to capture that braid and not leave any white gaps between the braid and the edge of the bag, because that will just pop out when you start adding your beautiful patterns or artwork to the bag. So we're almost ready to place our art. Just a little more work here. And actually, I think that's more shadow than it is the actual braid. I'm going to go back and fix that. It's okay for those shadows to show because that makes it look realistic. So let's see. I'm using the Shift key to add this back in. Okay. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to save this as Save Selection, peek at my names, right bag, no handle. Now, typically I would recommend that we show two different designs that coordinate together, like a pattern and a motif, and maybe or coordinating pattern on the side. So we need to do a couple more steps here to separate out the side of the bag. And that's actually nice that we have one that's flat on and straight and one that's at an angle so that we can showcase more artwork in this one product mock-up. So the next thing I'm going to do while this is activated, remember this is the right bag with no handle. I want this just the side panel, but I want it to be perfectly butted together with the front of the bag. So I'm going to try the polyagonal tool, and I'm going to remove this from my new side selection that I'm going to be making. So I have Option held, and I click outside, and then I can come down and see how close can I get to that bag. It has a little bit of a bend in it, which is just realistic. So I'm outside now, and I have to come around in just a few steps to bring this across, and then when I hover over, that little circle shows up. Now let's zoom in and see how that looks. It looks like it could use a little bit of work. So because it's curved, the polyagonal tool just couldn't quite get it. So I'm going to use the Shift key to add this little bit back in to the selection. And I think I'm going to switch to the polyagonal tool again, holding the Shift key. I'm going to see if I can just go a shorter distance and get that area. So that looks good. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to save this as the side panel. So this will be right bag side panel. Now our other dilemma is that we have when we did the front of the bag, it includes the side as well, and we don't want that. We need to go one more step. I'm going to deselect, because if we put a solid color in here, we don't want to have a pattern behind that. We want to be able to see the shadow and the creases to make our mock-up look as realistic as possible. So what you're going to do is first load your right-hand bag, the right bag with no handle. Then I'm going to go back to the selection and say load side. I'm going to say right bag side panel, and I'm going to say subtract from selection. So it just took out the it just cropped out the full bag, the full right bag with no handle, and where these seams are going to match up separately. So this now, actually I see a mistake here too. I can fix this at this point. I missed one of these handles. So let's fix that. Before we save it, we're going to use the lasso tool with the option. Okay, so now I have corrected that chord, eliminated it from the selection, and now I'm going to save the selection, but I'm going to write over the one that I've already done for the right bag, no handle, and I'm going to say replace it with this new one where it doesn't include the side panel and it doesn't include the chord that I missed. Now we're ready to add artwork. Now I could do one more step and isolate just the handles if you wanted to change the colors. I'm not going to do that today on this demo because it's a pretty long demo as it is, but it is possible to go in and manipulate the colors so that they coordinate with all of your patterns. Since it's a gold, it's fairly neutral, so we'll just go with it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you how to add patterns to your library. I didn't do that in the other simpler ones. So Any repeat patterns that you have, whether they're done in Illustrator or Photoshop, you can define them as patterns in Photoshop. So I'm going to open up first this shibori print that I made, and I had put into repeat, and I can define the pattern. And so then it will add to my pattern library, and I can drag it into the particular group that I want. And then I can close this file. I don't need it anymore. And then I can do the same thing with any of my repeat patterns. So for example, this abstract brushstroke is an AI file, but if I drag it to Photoshop, I just make sure I want high res and RGB, and then I just go edit, define pattern, and then it automatically just puts it right into my library. And I don't need to save this. Once it's in the library, it's there. Let's just do a couple, let's do one more that coordinates with that. And sometimes the color mode is off, so you want to set that as RGB and then define pattern. And it pops right in. And then close that, don't save. So I'm back to my master Photoshop file. So this first set, I'll show you a few different options. I'm going to go ahead and load the selection of the let's see, I want the left bag with no handle. And then what I want to do next is go to new fill layer, pattern, go with the defaults on this first pop-up, and then it brings a second pop-up. It automatically defaults to the first pattern in your library, which in this case is a zebra print, but I don't want that one. I want the ones that I just did at the bottom. So for example, I'm going to do this abstract brushstroke, and I can also play with the scale. I can make it smaller or larger. So about 50% looks good. Round it off and say OK. And then I'm going to load now my right bag with no handle. And I can go to layer, new layer, pattern, and put in this complementary geometric. Okay, now in this case I think I do want to go a little smaller. Let's go with, let's say 75%. And because the bag is at an angle, I actually do want to put in some kind of angle. And I have to eyeball that. That's the opposite of the way I want to go. Let's put it in -10. That's too steep, so I can click on this to change it. Let's change it just to 2. I just want to angle it enough so it's matching up with that, with the slope of the bag or the perspective. Let's see, let's just try a couple options. That looks pretty good. Now I need to reposition it, so I'm going to unlink it and use the move tool, and I'm going to move it around to see if how that fits. It's kind of a difficult one. I think I'm going to switch these so that I don't have to go through that. So I'm going to just go ahead and change this one to that geometric, make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to unlink it so I can nicely position it. I think it would be better if the squares are cropped. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go back to this one and add the abstract brush strokes, which will lay out much nicer in something that's at an angle. I can put this back to a 0, since with an abstract it doesn't need to be, you know, with stripes and certain kinds of prints that have a true geometric feel, you're going to have to adjust that angle. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and plop it in there, and the angle doesn't matter. Now what I want to do is, what should I put on here to make it interesting? I think this is where having a collection of patterns really pays off, because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and activate the side panel. So I want the right bag side panel, and then I'm going to go to layer, new fill layer, pattern, go down to the geometric, and then I'm going to change the scale even smaller, and that looks pretty good to me. So then what I'm going to do is copy the photo again. So this will be gift bag set. And this is the, I'm just going to call it gift bag set. Then I'm going to duplicate it and call this gift bag set overlay. And then I'm going to drag it above all the artwork, and then just turn that layer on and off. You can see how that gives it a little bit of life, and you can, you know, it feels more three-dimensional. So that's the first one. So let's just save while we're here. Now what we can do too to keep our files organized, because this gift set, this one design has 3 layers, and if you build this up to a dozen or 2 dozen designs, you're going to have that many layers. So I'm going to add a new group, and I'm going to call this the abstract black and white. And then I'm going to drag all 3 of these layers into that folder. That way I can collapse the folder if I need to see what's in there, but I don't have as many I have to deal with now. So for the next one, so that would be using pattern combinations with complementary and coordinating patterns. The next one I want to show you is using patterns with a motif. So I'm going to first do the left bag, which I'm going to use left bag no handle, and I'm going to go to layer, new fill layer pattern, and I'm going to bring in this berry print that I did right here. And that's way too big, so I'm going to just guess at a size. Let's go with, that looks pretty good. I'm going to unlink these so I can position it a little better. You know, and I can always come back and adjust the style after I design this bag if I change my mind. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to, I'm going to go to the actual art file that I have for this and open it in Illustrator. So I have the purple, let's see, let's go with, so I'm going to open this in Illustrator. And let's see, I think I want to make the background light pink, so I'm going to pick which of my strawberries would look best on pink, and I'm going to make sure I've unlocked all the artwork layers. This happens to be on 3 layers, just to keep things easy, but I can come in here and just copy that berry, Command C, copy from Illustrator, and then go to Photoshop and Command V, paste. And it's going to give me, it might come in as pixels, but what you want to do is select Smart Object, because anything that you bring in from Illustrator can be brought in as a smart object, and then you can enlarge it in an unlimited way using the Command T, and you can shift it and not lose any. You can enlarge it as much as you want, and it's very crisp, and it doesn't lose its resolution. So that's why you want to keep it with the as a smart object. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new layer so I can add a background color. So I'll call this pink background, and I'm going to load the selection of right bag no handle, and I'm going to use my eyedropper to pick the pink, light pink color, and then I'm going to use my paint bucket to fill that area. Okay, now I have to decide what am I going to do on the side panel. I think I'd like to do I have a coordinate, I believe, for that. Yes, I have some stripes that go with this. So I'm going to bring it into Photoshop, and I'm going to define the pattern. And I'm going to, don't save. Actually, I thought I have a darker one. I think that will look better in a better contrast. And so sometimes, you know, you might want to add the entire collection to your library while you're at it so that you have everything that you need. So let's go back here. I'm going to now load my selection for the side. Then go to Layer, New Fill Layer Pattern. And then I'm going to navigate to the new stripe that I just added. Now this is where you could, let's say you wanted to do it at a 90 degree. Oops, not 90. Not 90. So you have a horizontal stripe. You probably go, because of the angle, it might have to go even a little more. See how it's going at an angle, maybe 101. Yeah, so that's pretty good. But I'm going to just keep it vertical, but that gives you an idea that you have lots of different options. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is add some typography. Sayings and things like that are really popular, especially on stationery and gift types of items. So I'm just going to go up to the layer. I'm going to go under the layer that's the gift bag overlay, but up to the top layer. So I'm going to start a new layer. By clicking on the type logo text tool, it will automatically generate a new layer. So I'm going to just do it out here so I can see. So I'm going to say you are sweet, because it's a gift bag. Maybe you are sweet. Let's see, I think that's pretty good. And it's in pink right now. I want to change the color to the purple. So I'm going to select the type and then use my eyedropper to get this purple. I didn't change it. Oh, here, I'm going to do it here. I have to do it from that palette, not from the main palette. So if you didn't catch that, I selected the type and then I clicked on the color picker, but I used the eyedropper to jump over to my own document. So if I wanted to use my red or my purple or my fuchsia, it's going to match my color palette. And I happen to already have it in a script that I like, that I used in a previously earlier today, but it's not quite big enough. So I'm going to just drag it up. And you can see the text is right here on the text layer. So I'm going to select the text, and then I'm going to just manually put in, that's too big. They don't really have a slider, so I'm going to, let's see, put in a number, 100. That looks pretty good. Now, the text is a little bit lost, so the last thing I'm going to do is put in a drop shadow. Let's just make it a tiny bit bigger. Let's just select it again. I'm going to just put in 110 points. Okay. Now while it's selected, well, I actually don't even have to be selected. I just need to be on this layer. I go to Layer, Style, Drop Shadow. And this is going to add a drop shadow. Now the last time I used the drop shadow, I was working on a much larger object, so it has this really big shadow, and that just doesn't look good with type. I think that with this very feminine script, I'm going to bring all these measurements back just by eye, and I'm also going to make sure the angle is dropping downwards to the right, because that's a more natural way for a shadow to look. And I can also adjust the opacity of this if I wanted a heavier shadow or a lighter shadow. I think it looks better with the lighter shadow, just enough to make it pop. And then that's my mock-up. Now I could just go one more detail and angle this text so that it's following this line right here. So I'm going to go to free transform. I'm going to go to transform and rotate. And so this is going to allow me to just rotate it visually, and I could even drag it down here so I can see if my angle is good. That looks good, and then I can just move it back up again. So that looks a little more natural, and the same with my strawberry. I'm going to angle it a tad. So I'm going to go to rotate, and I'm just going to just tweak the corner just a tiny bit, just to give it a little more natural perspective. And let's move this up a tiny bit. Okay, perfect. So There we go. So we have a pattern on the left, a motif with a saying on the right with a coordinating background color, and then we have one of the coordinating prints being used on the edge, the side of the bag. So this one's good to go. So we now have, I'm going to just make another folder. So make another group. This will be my berry design. And I can drag all these layers into that folder. They didn't all go. Let's see. Select and drag. You can see the little blue line pops up. That's when you know you've got them all. So they're all there. And I can go back to my abstract. So let's save one more time. Always save when you're doing big moves. So I'm going to go save as a copy, and then I'm going to navigate to my completed mockups, which will be the ones that are actually going into my portfolio. I'm going to choose JPEG, and then I'm going to use the same name that I used up here. Let's call this abstract black and white. That'll be that JPEG. And then turn that off, and then this one I'll call my berry. Let's call it strawberry. Strawberry, pink, and purple. And the other little shortcut I'm going to teach you is once you have that name, you can copy that, swipe it, and do Command C. And then when I go to save as a copy, I can use that name. So I'm going to go to my completed mockups, JPEG, and then I'm going to paste that name over the master. And I'm going to just take the spaces out. But that saves me from typing it, and also I know the name is going to be consistent with everything, my patterns and my layers and my mockups. So that's the that pretty much wraps up how to do the gift bags. And you can see now as I start accumulating mockups into my completed mockups folder, I can very quickly see what I have here. So I'm probably going to make all the mockups I need for a dozen or so pages, do that all in one sitting, and then I'll work on my portfolio all in one sitting, placing these into my various portfolio layouts. In this demo, I'm using a photograph template that I purchased from a website called Creative Market. Now this newer type of mockup comes with the selections in the form of smart layers. And so, which is great. It really makes it life easy for us as designers showcasing our art. But the issue is that they can be very expensive as you start to mock up all your artwork on different product categories. If you think of fashion and fashion accessories and home decor, which would include everything from rugs and pillows to full room displays with wall art, or dinnerware, servingware, all the bedding, bathroom decor like shower curtains and accessories, outdoor furniture, just all puzzles. There's just so many different ways that we can showcase our artwork. So you can end up spending hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands of dollars on these product templates. And some of the ones that I purchased just even the last couple of years, some of the 3D tools that were used by the creators are no longer supported by Photoshop. So I actually have to open them in an older version of Photoshop to even be able to access. That's why on my computer I have both the Photoshop 2021 and I have 2023, because some of my templates will only work in the 2021 version. It's very likely that in the future we might not even have access to this older version. So that means buying new templates that are updated, or doing them by hand as I've shown you on the previous demos. So in this one, let's get to the cut to the chase here. So what happens is that there's a smart layer. So for example, the cup is right here, and they have them organized into folders, and these already have shadows and highlights and so on. This even has a bowl, which I had cut off. You can actually expand the canvas if you want to use the bowl. I just didn't want to use it in my particular mock-ups. So you could expand the canvas and you'll have access to that bowl. I'm going to just undo that because I like to keep mine really simple and not have the bowl showing. So then here we have the small plate. So this one also has a folder, and the large plate. And then this is a background color if you want to add a background color. I usually leave it off and just have it as a white background. So let's start with our large dinner plate. So what happens is, notice I only have one file open in Photoshop right now. If you check my windows, I only have this one file and there are no other tabs exposed. When you double click on the Smart layer, it actually opens a new document that's embedded in the master document. And you can check this image size to see what image size you're dealing with. So it's about 4.5 inches at 300 dpi. So I'm going to now add a pattern here. So I'm just going to do layer, new fill layer pattern, and go with the default here. And again, it's going to pop up with the first pattern in my library. And I'm going to navigate to the designs that I plan to use for this demo. So let's go with, I'm going to go with this teal rose design, and I obviously need to reduce it quite a bit. So I'm going to just, that looks pretty good just visually, but they don't really give you any parameters, so you have to maybe try it a couple times to see what pops in. So that looks pretty good as far as scale. Now I'm going to collapse this and go to the small plate, double click this, and I'm going to add another fill layer pattern and use one of my coordinates for this collection. So navigating down, let's say for example my damask. So let's see what that looks like. At 10% is too small. Let's try 30. That looks pretty good. Let's see how that looks. Close, save. And I like that. I like the decor. I mean, I like the look of it, but I think it's one, it's not centered on the plate, so I want to adjust that. And two, it's not the right scale in relation to the dinner plate. I think I'm going to make it a little smaller and make the dinner plate larger. So I'm going to double click on this again, and let's manipulate this. I want it to go just a tiny bit smaller, so I'll go 25. And when you're in the pattern layer, you can center this. So see how I'm looking at this point and this point to get it reasonably centered. And then I'm also looking top to bottom to get that reasonably centered. So that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to close this layer and save. And then I'm going to go back to my dinner plate to adjust the scale of that. I'd like it to be a little bigger now. So let's make this 25, 25. And see how that looks in combination. Okay, then I have my cup, and I think I'm going to, I'll just use one of my patterns for right now. I'll show you a few different options. So this area is going to wrap around the entire cup, so it's going to have a warped look to it once it gets onto the cup mock-up. So new fill layer pattern, and let's see, what can we use with that? I can scroll through my coordinates and see what I think works best with this. I am going to go with my pattern here, and let's see what that scale looks like. So close, save. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think it could be a little bigger. Let's double click, and let's bump it up 5% and see how that looks. Save. Okay, so there you go. Now I don't have any designs prepared for a border. I think a border design would actually look really good on the cup, and I don't have those files at my fingertips at the moment, but what I might do is if I were to include the bowl, obviously I would expand the canvas. I'm just going to put the reference point to the top, so any new size I add will be only added to the bottom. And then what I might do is I would find my Illustrator file for this damask and make a border that would go around that. So when I get to the bowl layer, I would place that art as a border and maybe a solid color here. and then put that on the bowl. I think that would look very nice. So that's one option that you could do with the patterns. Now we can take this and put it all into a group. Let's say start a new group, and we'll call this the Wild Rose Teal Collection. And I'm going to go ahead and put everything into that folder. So within a group you can turn that off and have all your layers here. Now to start my second design, I can simply now take that, select that level of folder and say duplicate group. And I don't know which name I'm going to use yet, so I'll save that for later. So let's go into the group now, into the large dinner plate, and I'm going to double click on this and go to a different collection. So in this case I'm going to use, let's see, I'll go ahead with the Wild Rose collection in a different colorway. But this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a motif on the plate. So in this case, I'm going to go to my small plate, double click, and I'm going to just delete this layer completely. And I'm going to go to my art file. And, oh, I know what I want to do. Let's start over here. Okay, I'm going to start with the large plate, and I'm going to delete the pattern that's there, and I'm going to put in a new layer, and I'm going to put my berry pattern, which we used previously in the gift bag mock-up. Now I have to just guess at the size. Again, I'm assuming that the plate's going to somewhat crop like what we see here. So let's just see how that works out. Save, and good. So there's a little, I'm not really happy with the way that's cropped, but we can fix that later. It's a little off center. What I want to do now is let's also put it on the cup. So just simply change the pattern that was there from the duplicated version. And it's way too big, so let's try 15, maybe even 10. We won't know till we see it, but it's very easy to change. Okay, so that might work. Now what I want to do is go to my Illustrator file and place a smart object on here of the berries. So I have my berries. Let's open it in Illustrator. And I'm probably gonna color the plate pink, just similar to what we did in the gift bag. So making sure all my layers are unlocked with the motifs, I'm going to select this berry, copy, revert back to Photoshop, paste as a smart object. So there I have my berry, and I can now position that however I like, whatever looks good. Now what I do, I've actually had a change of heart on this. Oh, actually I pasted it in the wrong place. That's why it's up on top of the cup. So it kind of jumped to the other layer. Let's just drag it down. Oh, yeah, there we go. I can just drag it down and it'll work. Then what I'm going to do, I actually will use the bowl in this one because I have coordinates. So I'm going to go to the bowl, and I have double click on the smart layer, and I'm going to put the new layer, new fill layer pattern, and navigate to the stripe design that I have. So let's see how that looks just at the scale that it came in at first before we make any adjustments. Save. Okay, that looks actually pretty good at that scale. Now I think these two, the dinner plate and the cup, need to have more contrast. So I'm going to go back to the dinner plate and make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to work on, see if I can get it a little better centered. So here's the large plate. Also notice that I've made my pattern library in the small thumbnail view to allow more space for all these layers, because I want to be able to access all these layers at one time without having to scroll a lot. So double click on here and you can see it's not centered. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's go with 25%. And using the move tool, I can make sure that this pattern is centered nicely. And close the tab, save, and let's see what we have. Okay, that looks pretty good. I might reduce the berries just again a tiny little bit because of this cropping. Let's just do that one more time. Let's go with 23% and center it. And close. And now the contrast looks really good. Okay, so you can also move these things around. Like in this case, my strawberry's really getting hidden. So I could go to the cup group and I could just move the whole cup. I could go to the bowl and move that down so that these are somewhat on the same level here. I think that would look cleaner in my mock-up. So let's bring that down and bring the cup down a little bit too. And that way I could, you know, I could move it anywhere I want, but I want the strawberry to be a little better showcased. And let's also move that down because it's very close to the edge here, but not at the bottom. So I'm going to go and just make that little adjustment. There we go. Okay, so that looks really good. I could also add a background color here. So to this, the smart layer the smart layer, let's pick our color first. I'm going to use the eyedropper to select this light pink. Then I'm going to double click on the smart layer for the small plate and simply fill it with this color. And it's actually not a really good color. Let's try that again. Yeah, that's way too dark. My eyedropper didn't quite get the pink I wanted. Let's zoom in a little. Oh, the problem is that it's very muted. Let's go to the smart layer, not that one, on the big plate. It's muted from the shadows. So I'm going to take it from this layer. There, now I have a nice pastel pink. So let's close that, go back to our salad plate and fill it with this color. Now I can close that. And now you see that my salad plate now has a light pastel pink background. So that's the way to make your dinnerware mock-up. And so these are what are called smart object documents. And as I mentioned before, there are many out there, but you're quite limited to what photos are available. And they're also, it really adds up expense-wise. So I want you to know a variety of techniques for creating your mock-ups. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how to make a bedding mock-up with a flat stock photo. So here's a blank full-size bed, or blank white full-size bed that I purchased on Shutterstock. And it doesn't come with any selection. So I'm going to first select the background and I'm going to inverse. Then I'm going to save the selection as the full bed contour. Now we're never going to use this full bed contour, but we use this to consistently select other areas of the bed. So what I'm going to start with is the duvet cover. So the first thing, while this is activated, I'm just going to remove a big chunk of the selection. So holding the Option key in combination with the lasso tool, I'm going to just remove the whole top of the bed. And then I'm going to zoom in a little so I can see it a little closer. And the best tool I think to use for this one would be the polyagonal tool. And then again, holding the Option key, I'm going to click it way out here so I can see and make a straight line at a diagonal, and also shoot well beyond the mock-up. And then just go around it, click a few times, and then when you hover over the start point, a little circle, outline circle pops up at the bottom right of the tool, and that allows you to connect. Now this is, so that's going to give us a nice straight diagonal line, but unfortunately the real photograph is a little bit off, which is going to happen in a real photograph, especially a fabric. It's not going to be a perfectly straight line. And then you can see there's this little tiny area that was missed. So I'm going to use the Option key to capture that. And I'm just going to kind of go down here. I'm holding the space bar that's giving me this hand tool, kind of see what I'm dealing with here. And that shadow, I mean, you could go with this as it is, but it's really going to show up when you, it's really going to show up in your mock-ups, so it's well worth doing this, a better job of this. I'm going to switch back to the polyagonal tool, and with the holding the Shift key, I'm going to add in this little amount. I'm going to go in just sections because it's not perfectly straight, and just get as close as I can to the edge of the fabric. And as you can see, it's now starting to curve out again. So now I'm just going to loop around and connect it. And so that made a nice selection around the fabric. Now we're doing the opposite here, where it the selection is now needs to be removed. Some of the area needs to be removed. So I'm going to hold, in this case, the Option key, and I'm going to click in sections to capture this slightly arced fabric edge, and then loop around. And then with holding the space bar, I'm just going to examine it. There's another area that needs to be fixed so it looks more realistic. So that one, I think I'm going to leave that because whatever is going, this is like the folded area of the fabric. It's sort of a shadow area, so I think it's going to look better belonging to the fold back of the duvet rather than the front of the duvet. I believe so. You could go either way. It's subjective. So the main thing, though, the important thing is I now have a nice selection of the duvet front. So I want to save that now as a separate selection. Duvet front. Then my next selection is going to be the duvet fold back. So I want these to join perfectly together. So the only way to achieve that is, and the easiest way, is to inverse. So now the background's selected, but this edge is going to meet identically. So I'm going to use the marquee, the rectangle marquee, to just quickly eliminate some of the pieces. I'm holding the Option key to delete. So I'm taking away this whole area, and then I'm also taking away the whole top of the bed and the sides and the other side. Now, because this is the area that I want, so now I need to zoom in, and what I want to do is first I'm going to use the polyagonal tool to get that top edge, holding Option key because we're removing, and then I'm going to click and go across as close as I can to that edge. And you can see also the fabric is slightly arced or bent in this configuration, in this top edge as well. So I've gotten as close as I can. Then I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to use the rectangular marquee with the Option key tool, and then to get this straight edge. And then that remaining part, I'm going to use the regular lasso tool. So holding Option, because it's a curve, I'm just going to draw around it and loop around and just let it click. It's not quite good enough. Let's go back in. Let's use the Option key again and just get a little bit closer. Sometimes it's hard to keep a steady hand. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to just quickly move over to the other side. And here, back out a little bit. I'm using Command minus to zoom out. I'm going to use the rectangular marquee again with the Option key and just shave off the side. And then zoom in. It's worth taking your time to get a really nice selection so that you can use it for all your mock-ups, and you only have to do this part once. So let's just do the top, Option. And I'm not really happy with this edge. I was, oh yeah, because it's not quite straight. So this is another example of where I used a rectangular marquee, but it's closer, it seems to be closer at the bottom. Oops, what happened? Here we go, okay. All right, I thought I lost my selection. I am gonna go back, I'm just gonna go back a couple steps. There. I'm going to do this again because I just don't think that was as close as I could get. I'm going to use the rectangular marquee again with the Option key. And let's just see how that looks close up. It's still a little, it's still, now before I had shaved off a little, this time I just want to get a little closer. So I can, if you pull this down below the image area, it will automatically scroll. I'm holding Option and just getting close enough in that I can really see and get right in on that edge. Okay, that's much better. And now I'm going to use the lasso tool to eliminate this part. And this is kind of a shadow area, but if I take it away, it's going to, let's see, I might want to just retouch that part out. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the selection like that, and I'm going to come back later and retouch that out. I don't think it's necessary, and it's making it a little tricky on my, where to end my selections. And then I'm gonna, now I need to use the polyagonal, holding now with the Shift key to add this back into the selection. I'm gonna come in here and doing this in sections, try to capture this part that's not included in the straight line part. So I'm gonna, for me it's easier to work in this direction, so I'm gonna go back to this side. Being right-handed, I think I need to start up here. Okay. Let's use the lasso tool first to eliminate. Zoom out just a tiny bit, and now I'm going to use the polyagonal tool with the Option key to remove. And I'm just going to have to do this in sections in order to stay close enough to really see what's going on. So Option, that one did not go well. I'm going to undo that, Command Z. I just didn't, I clicked a little bit too high, and rather than trying to fix it, it was a bit easier just to undo. And you just want to make sure you loop around into an enclosed shape. So here, don't like that one either. So undo. I think this needs to come up a little higher. And you can pull off the screen. So let's see if that'll save a little time. I'm going to zoom out. Oh, it's a little tricky when you have this polyagonal tool. Let's see, click, and then I have to remember where the beginning was. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then just one more section, but I can barely see it from that distance. Option. Okay, so now there is the duvet fold back. So let's go to selection, save selection. And if you want to keep your naming consistent, you can peek at the other names just by holding down that pull down. So I'm going to go duvet back, or you could call it a fold back. Now I'm going to do this. Now in order to keep the selection between the duvet back and the sheet identical and budding, I want to do the same thing. I want to inverse this selection using either the lasso or the rectangle, just getting rid of big areas of the selection, like in a big chunk. And then I can do the same with the top. And I can even do the sides. So either the rectangle or the lasso, doesn't matter. Then I'm going to come in here and actually get rid of that. Okay, then let's see what we have here. I'm going to use the rectangle with the option to get rid of that straight line. And then here, definitely have to use the lasso tool for anything curvy. So I'm holding the option. And just doing it in chunks. If the photo had more contrast, you could use the magic wand, but it's going to be very hard to do that. So holding the shift key to add in back that little shadow area. Option key to remove. I'm shifting, alternating back and forth between the option and the shift key to either remove or add to the selection. Zoom out, and then I'm going to use the rectangle marquee to get this straight line. And I'm not quite sure that's in enough. Could be a little tighter, closer to the photo. Let's just shave off, see if we can just shave off a pixel or two. Okay. Okay, so that's good. Now we're going to save this selection as the sheet. And then we're going to do this again for the edge of the pillow. We want these to butt up exactly, so we're going to inverse and remove these big portions of the selection. And in this case, because we have the pure white background, we can use the magic wand in combination with the option key and just click the background. And then that gives us a perfect selection of the two pillows. So I'm going to save this again. This will be two pillows. Now, the two pillows I'm saving now so I can alternate between the right and left and isolate the right and left. I really want to have separate selections for the pillows because they just don't look realistic if you plug a pattern in there. It looks better if you do them individually so that you can center the pattern on each pillow. And also it gives you the option to color the photos with a background color and put a motif on there. And I'll show you how to do that. So now that we have this two pillow, I'm going to just, with the lasso tool, just quickly remove the majority of the right hand and then zoom in. And with the lasso tool and option key, I'm going to go around the left edge. Okay, let me look at that one more time. I'm not 100% sure about some of these shadows, if I want them to be on the right pillow or the left pillow. I think I'll add this one back in. I'm holding the shift key and I'm just sort of kind of splitting the difference between the two where I think it looks better. And this looks like it should be part of the left pillow as well as this. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out. Now I'm going to save this as the left pillow. And then I'm going to deselect, Command D. Now what I'm going to do is activate the two pillow again so I can isolate the right hand pillow. But instead of having to do this with the lasso tool, I want to make sure that these butt exactly. So what I'm going to do, and this is the first time I'm showing this little trick, is to subtract the left pillow from the two pillow. So I have the two pillow activated, and then I'm going to go back to load selection, and this time I'm going to select the left pillow, but I'm going to select subtract from selection. So it's now going to perfectly subtract the left pillow from the two pillow, and it leaves me with the right pillow. And that's going to assure that these lines are butted exactly, and then it won't have a white gap there when I add my artwork. Okay, so that completes all our selections. I do want to, there was one that I was a little concerned about with the, with that little shadow area. So I'm going to put that back. I think it was the duvet back. Let's go back and look at that corner a little bit and see if we need to, we do need to remove that. I think we need to remove that area. So what I'm going to do is, in order for it to match up perfectly, I'm going to inverse. And then what I'm going to do is with my, let's see, I want to inverse, and then I want to erase. I'm going to clone out that little area. So let's go with a small clone, and I'm going to hold the Option key and just click in and kind of put some of that white area. Just get rid of that with the white background. I could have used the eraser, but just in case this background actually has like a one shade of color, one shade of gray above white, it would not match. So there, that's perfect now. Let me just test the, I want to just check this, the duvet front selection and make sure that it matches up with this area that I just retouched. Okay, that looks very good. Okay, good. Okay, so now we're ready to add artwork. So with the duvet front selected, I'm going to go ahead and put in my strawberry pattern. I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer Pattern. Okay, just go with default. It automatically goes to the first pattern in the library. And I'm going to navigate down to my strawberry. And then from here, I'm going to consider what scale looks best. Now, when you work on bedding, you need to realize that the repeat size is approximately every 24 inches or less, or any division of 24 inches. So this is actually not going to work, because if I'm looking at this strawberry to this strawberry, it's pretty much about half the bed. Let's just unlink these so we can move it. And the reason I bring this up is because you need to make it look fairly realistic. So if I were to divide this bed into 4 parts, you're going to get approximately 4 repeats across a bed, a full-size to queen-size bed. So I'm just eyeballing these other guidelines. So my repeat needs to fit between these 2 guidelines. So I'm going to go ahead and just slide with the slider. I'm going to see if I can get it fairly close. So I've unlinked this so I can move it around with the move tool. It's just a guideline, but see, this is about 4 repeats across the whole bed. So if you're presenting this to a bedding manufacturer, if you have the pattern just too oversized, they're going to know that you're an amateur and that you don't really know some of the game plans or rules, production rules on how to make bedding. And there can be large placement prints, but they are several times more expensive, like double or triple the price of doing repeat patterns. So when I have several bedding licensees that I've worked with over the years, and several of them do not allow me at all to do any placement graphics because they're trying to sell within a certain price point. You're going to find that more in either the digital printing world or in the luxury end of bedding. For some of the lower price points of bedding and quilts and comforters, they're going to want to stay within that 24-inch repeat to keep the price point down. So that looks pretty good. And then I can turn these guides off with Command semicolon. It's also available under the guides view, clear guides, or turn guides off, etc. So now what I'm going to do is add a complementary coordinating print to the duvet back. So I'm going to use one of my stripe patterns that I have for this collection. And I think I'll go with the light pink to contrast this darker purple color. So let's activate the duvet back. And then I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer Pattern, navigate to the pink stripe, and I'm going to also, I think the 100% is fine. And then I definitely need to put an angle in here, and I'm going to have to just play with it to see what angle. I don't want, that's completely the wrong direction, so I need to go minus, and I'm going to put in minus 20. I want these stripes to be perpendicular to the diagonal area, because if the stripes were straight and vertical on the duvet back, when it gets folded back, they would be at an angle. So I need to go up a little more to make that happen. That's pretty close. I'm just doing it by eye. That's even better. So that also looks really good. And then I'm going to now do the pillow. I'm going to now do the sheets. And sheets are often in a very small print or even just a solid color. And in my case, I'm just going to do a solid color that coordinates with the pattern. So I'm going to go to my eyedropper and I'm going to select this light pink, and I'm going to look at it here, and then I'm going to use the paint bucket to pour it in. I actually need to create a separate layer for this, so this is going to be the sheet pink. And I'll pour this in and see if I like that color. Maybe we can go a little lighter. I'm going to double click on my color picker, and I'm just going to go to a slightly lighter within the same color family, but I'm going to recolor that. It's just I don't want it to compete with my designs. I want it to be just very subtle. Okay, and then and I had to start a new layer for that solid fill in. I'm going to go ahead and layer these two. I'm going to call this the stripe. Pink, and this is the berry. I'm going to call it purple because that's the background color and the dominant color. Then now I'm going to work on my pillows. So often with bedding, for the pillow shams, they would use the same pattern and scale as the duvet front, or they might use the back, whichever works best. As long as you're not introducing a third pattern. That's sort of the rules in the lower, more economical price range. So I'm going to go ahead and load in my pattern for the left pillow, and I'm going to put in I'm going to do new layer style, new fill layer pattern, and navigate to my berry pattern. Now, I don't remember what percentage I used here on the duvet front, so I'm going to go back and check that. It's 34. Okay, so I want to change this now to 34 so that they're made of the same fabric. And the other thing I want to do is center them. So I'm going to unlink, and I can come in here and reposition this so that I have, for example, 3 rows of berries and it's centered from left to right. I'm going to do the same with the duvet cover. I don't like the way that the berry leaves are up at the bottom, just sticking out at the bottom there. I'm going to go ahead and drag this down and center it from left to right, just so it looks aesthetically pleasing. However, I don't really like that little part of the berry, so I'm going to just nudge it down a tiny bit more. So these are just tiny little details that make your pattern, your mock-ups just look so much more aesthetically pleasing. And then lastly, to showcase an alternative pillow, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to put in a, let's see, I'm going to activate the right pillow, excuse me, and then I'm going to put in the same pattern, so layer, fill layer, pattern. I'm going to go to the berries and put in 34%, and then I'm going to unlink and move this so that they center. This one doesn't want to quite center. Let's see. And I'm also going to make sure that they align. I can drag down a guideline to make sure that the pattern lines up from left to right. And I think it's a little bit off. I'm going to zoom in to make sure. Yeah, I'm not really crazy about the way that this is centering, so I might go back to this one and change it. Go back to this one and just tweak it a little bit. I think, yeah, I'd rather not have those those two pieces of berries cut the way that they are. That's an aesthetic decision. Okay, so then the last thing is I want to add a decorative pillow to make this just much more appealing and to showcase my artwork the best. So I'm going to jump over. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to go over to my folder and I'm going to get my pillow mock-up that I did in an earlier demo. Okay, so I have my pillow. Now what I'm going to do is get rid of this layout, and I'm going to add in, I'm going to go ahead and load the selection for the contour. I'm going to start a new layer, and this will be pink. This is going to be background pink. And it still reads the, I still have access to the color. Let's bring that over. Oh, actually, sorry, I opened this in the other Illustrator, other Photoshop. Let's just not save this. I want to be in the same version. Okay, I'm in Photoshop 2023. I have several versions of Photoshop because I want to have the 2021. I still have access to that because I want to have access to the 2021, even though I'm not using it for this demo because it has Pantone numbers in it, where the 2023 does not. So let's just start again. Now I'm in the same version of Photoshop. The reason I want to be in the same version, of course, is so that I can have access to this color. Once this pink has been loaded into the color, it's going to automatically open up in the new document. So let's turn this off. Let's start a new layer, and this is going to be my pink background. And I'm going to activate my selection. And then with the paint bucket, I'm going to color this in pink. Then what I'm going to do is just deselect. I don't need to have it selected for this other part that I'm going to do. I'm going to go and open up my berry art in Illustrator. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to pick one of these berries. I'm going to unlock all the layers with the art, and I'm going to select this berry, copy, Command C, go back to Photoshop and paste, Command V, and it's going to give me the option of either pixels or sometimes it's set to pixels. I want a smart object because I'm bringing vector art in. The reason for that, in this case I'm reducing, but with vector art you can, with smart objects, excuse me, you can scale this in an unlimited manner, so it gives you the effect of a vector art in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this to where I think it looks good, and if you move it around with your move tool, you see that a center line pops up vertically and also horizontally. It's basically, it sort of snaps in place of where the center is. So you can see temporarily there that how you can see those guidelines. Okay, so good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. Let's see, let's save. And then I'm going to create a new folder for this berry design. And I'm going to select both of those layers and drag it into that folder. Now, just temporarily, I'm going to flatten this so I can bring it into my other mock-up. So I'm not going to save the flattening, but I want to flatten it just temporarily, so because you won't be able to grab all these layers in one swoop, because we have the overlay, we have the vector art, we've got the pink background, and we've got the base photo. So I'm going to just go merge visible, and now I have a flattened photo that I can now select, Command A, copy, and then come back over here to my main. Oops, you know what? I don't want the pillow. Let's do that again. I mean, I don't want the white background. Let's undo that. Undo merge visible. Okay, so what I want to do is actually just merge the layers that I've selected. That's better, because then I don't have a oh, you know what? No, that's not right. I want to undo. I don't want that top photo. That's what's creating the let's just merge these two layers. Okay, now it has a clear background. Okay, so I'm going to Command A, select all, Command C, copy, and then bring it back over to my other document and paste it in. I'd really like to have that photo in. I think I did that before, but I got to remember how I did that. Okay, let's try that one more time. Let's delete this. Okay, so let's undo layer visibility, undo. I think this is how we do it. Okay, here's how we can do it. Okay, so I'm going to say flatten visible, merge visible. I'm going to load the selection. Now I'm going to copy, Command C, and then paste. Okay, now I have the photographic shadows and everything. I just had to remember how to do that. So let's undo so we don't lose that. Undo merge visible, and then undo. I don't want to undo merge layers. I want to get back to this point so I can save this pillow now and not worry about, I have my art in there, but I'm not going to lose all my layers. So let's get rid of this one. Let's see, that's the good one. Okay, so these two layers can be deleted. And this is now our pillow. So this is our decorative pillow, which come in a variety of sizes. There's 16 by 16, 12 by 12, 16 by 16, 20 by 20, and 24 by 24. So there's a whole variety. I'm going to just make it, it looks really big compared to the main pillows. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce that a little bit. This can be just a visual, but that gives it a nice little cute accent to the whole thing. And then the one last thing that you can do, this is optional, but for example on the duvet back, I might have a drop shadow for that, so it just gives it a little more dimension. But actually there's one thing I forgot to do, and that's to duplicate the bed master photo and call it this an overlay. Let's see what this adds to our 3 dimensions and if we need additional shadows. So I'm going to put it above all the artwork, change it to multiply, and actually that does give us a good shadows, but it's cutting, it's got a weird shadow over the pillow. So I'm going to move the pillow above the shadows, and that actually looks really good. So now that I have this overlay, it's given more dimension and shadows to the whole bed. So it really feels like it's soft and it's curving around the edge of the bed. And then the last thing I could do is add a drop shadow on this decorative pillow, just so it separates a little bit more from the sheet. So I'm going to go to layer style, and I'm going to add drop shadow. And then you can see that it's add a drop shadow. In this case, I want the drop shadow going downward, as if the light's coming from the top, from say the ceiling. The shadow would fall in a downward direction. And I can also increase these, and I could even, you can play with the size, the distance, and also the darkness. I usually don't go more than 50% because then it starts looking a little too hard. But that looks really good. So now what we're going to do is just save this, and then we're going to put all of this into a group. So let's make a new group and call this the berry design. And then I can put all of these, except for the master on the bottom, into the berry. So that gives us a nice way to consolidate all of those layers needed for this one mock-up. And then I would, of course, save this one more time. And then we can save this as a JPEG, which would be what you put into your portfolio. So I'm going to call this bedding, and I'm just going to call this the berry design. And then to create a second bedding design, you would simply duplicate the group, duplicate group, give it a new name, and then you can go through and replace all these designs with a different grouping. You know, adjusting sizes as necessary and colors, etc., and creating a separate pillow or whatever else you need at that point. So that's it. In this demo, I am showing you how to create a product mock-up using existing photography. I found this photograph on Anthropologie's website, and so for the purpose of using some really unusual or trendy shapes for my mock-ups, rather than just being limited to what's available in the various digital mock-up marketplaces. They're not going to have dishes with scalloped edges like this, certainly. So what you want to do, I did a screen capture, and this is going to be a low-res picture because it's just a screen capture. So first of all, I'm going to edit out any screen grab markings and things like that. Now, of course, we're not reselling this, or I wouldn't recommend necessarily posting this anywhere. It's just for the purpose of showcasing your artwork on your private portfolio that you're showing to clients in a very limited way. And sometimes the client wants to see the art specifically on shapes like this. When I was licensing with a company that made dinnerware, one here based in Los Angeles, they often knocked off shapes of ceramics from Anthropologie and other trendy brands, and so I would need to mock up my artwork, and their factory would recreate that shape. So I mean, knocking off the shape is kind of on them, but sometimes they're also providing a photograph. It's not necessarily a copy like this. It might be a fashion line that has an existing dress or something, and they want to see your artwork on that. So there's many circumstances where you might have to use this technique. So I just edited out the markings, and now what I'm going to do is create selections for each plate. I'm only going to do the first two because just to keep this short and get you to the point of understanding. Now you can try the quick selection tool. This might not work because there's not very much contrast between the background, but it actually already got this whole background. It didn't get the shape over here, so it's not really helping me very much because it's jumping out of the boundaries. So if you have a lot of, I'll try it on the first plate and see how that works. It's not working very well. There has to be enough contrast. I'll show you an example of how I did it on a fashion project. But in this case, I'm going to just use the lasso tool because it's really the only way to go. I don't have enough color contrast to use the magic wand in this case. So I'm just going to go with the lasso and just by hand, little by little, capture this shape. And actually, I didn't do a great job there. Holding the shift key, I'm not going to add. It's very hard to go around the whole thing in one shot. So it's better just to assume you're doing it in sections like this. Now I can get the middle in one big swoop, and then using the shift key, I'm going to go around the scalloped edge. The best that I can, and those things can always be fixed. I might have to zoom in to do a better job. So let's go around the edge a little bit better. And that looks pretty good. Here I need to add. I'm holding shift to add. An option to remove if the selection went out too far. Shift to add, and option to remove. And I'm pressing the space bar to bring up the hand tool so I can navigate around the shape, the object, without having to scroll in and out. So I'm going to save this selection now. I'm going to call this plate 2, and the one to the left will be plate 1. Now I want the seam between plate 1 and plate 2 to be exact, so I'm going to use the same technique that I showed you in the bedding and so on. I'm going to inverse this. So now I have the opposite selected. So this, where these are adjacent, will line up perfectly. So I'm going to use the marquee tool with the option and just do some big swipes to get rid of all this, because I just only want the small plate. Okay, so quickly got rid of that, and I don't need to touch that line because I want to keep that intact. So here there is an opportunity to use the magic wand because this looks like a clear background, and let's see what our setting is. It's at 15. Let's see, hold the option to remove, and that's pretty good. I could have gone less. Let's undo. Let's reduce this to about 10. Hold the option key, and then that gives me a nice selection around the plate 1. It missed this tiny little part, so I'm going to do that. Remove it with the shift key, or no, excuse me, with the option key. Remove with the lasso. And then let's see what we have down here. Here I think it's safer to use the lasso, so I'm going to just use this. Because of that shadow, it's not going to really get the edge of the dish. and Shift to add for anything that you might have cut out. It's very low res, you know, in these cases when you're doing screen grabs, so it's not going to be as nice of a selection that as we had on some of the high res pictures that have been purchased. Oops, I don't like that. I'm going to undo and hold Option. I'm more comfortable going in this direction now. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to save this selection as Plate 1. Now, you could go through the trouble too of retouching out all this decor, which actually could be worth it. We'll see how it looks first. I'm going to first load in Plate 1. Select Load Selection Plate 1, and then add Layer, New Fill Layer Pattern, and then navigate to the design I want to place in here. So in this case, I'm going to do a tie-dye design, and it's quite big, so let's reduce that. Okay, that looks pretty good, and I can unlink this and use the Move tool to move this in a better position. And then I can go to load Plate 2, and I can go Layer, New Fill Layer, Pattern, OK, and then navigate to my other tie-dye that I want to use. Okay. So as you can see, it's easy to fill it with patterns. It has the shape, but it doesn't have any shadows to it. So it's a really kind of quick and dirty way to do a mock-up. And so, but you can see the usefulness of these unique shapes compared to what we can buy in the marketplace. Now I have another licensee I work with quite a lot where I have to use clothing from their product line. So what I do is I select, I make a selection on the over an existing garment. So I create my selections just like I showed you using the lasso tool. So I've got one for the top and I've got one for the bottom. And then I can put in my layers. So this could have the same pattern top and bottom, or it could have contrasting. For example, here I could put in New Layer, and I could put in these stripes, for example. And then I could go to the top, select Load Selection, Top, and I could go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Pattern, and I could go to my coordinating berry pattern, which is way too big, obviously. It has to go way down. These are super low res. Let's make that 3. Okay, that looks good. Because look at the image size. It's only about 9 by 12 at 72 dpi, so it's quite low res. But this is adequate for this particular client. I've done over 100 garments for them so far, and so this is how I would present the all of my patterns. And so with their permission, I have the rights to use, I have their permission to use their product lines. I'll just show you really quickly what are my presentations and what that looks like. So for example, this is for the summer print campaign. So I've gone through the catalog and I've just done mock-ups using their existing garments and how my patterns would be showcased on these garments. And see, sometimes I even add, like this top separates here. So I did them as separate selections and I added a drop shadow, which I showed you on the gift bag mock-up. But I just added a drop shadow to the top so that it gives it a nice clear differentiation from the bottoms. And this is, you know, even though they have a very flat look, it's enough, it's good enough for this particular case, because they just want to really evaluate the pattern and kind of the scale. And because I'm working with people in the company that are used to seeing these kind of mock-ups, these are completely adequate for this type of presentation that will only be used in-house. I would never post these on social media or on my website. These would be only for presentation between me and a client, in considering these internal documents. Anyway, so I hope that helps, and that you can go online and let's just say, for example, you want to find, let's say you want to find a scalloped dinner plate. Scalloped dinner plate. Go to Google Images, and there you could find different plates that you could download. And it's plain white, so you know, you might be able to get a bigger version of it. You know, I'd definitely do more research and find the best one. So some of these you might be able to get a bigger view of it if you're lucky. These are not allowing me to do that, but you get the idea. You can go online and find a variety of various shapes so that you're not limited to what's available as a smart template, and put together your own really unique presentations within your portfolio. But you're not, I would not, because you don't have rights to use these photographs, I would only use them for private portfolios and not for social media or websites or any kind of usage like that. It's just to give an internal presentation so that the client or manufacturer that you're working with has a good idea of, you want to do this pattern on this custom shape, and if they like it, then they would be willing to manufacture it. Or you could even do a drawing, a vector drawing of the exact shape that you want and recreate it that way. So that's it for now.